Good afternoon, everybody. It's Carpo again for my second video of the day, or maybe third or fourth. Today, I want to talk about addiction. I think about this a lot because as a person who has an addictive personality, I've always wondered if addictions are something that we create or is something that nature just provides as kind of a, we talk about the reward system. We could start off by talking about drugs that release dopamine. Whereas, let's take sex and heroin, and they both do the same thing. They both allow the body to feel, the brain to feel a dopamine release. Some drugs inhibit dopamine reuptake, allowing more to flow through, like cocaine. There are many different degrees and ways that drugs work on your system, and the body chemistry is so delicate yet so complicated in the sense that some people may be deficient, let's say, in dopamine. So they may have an addiction to heroin or something like it, but not necessarily to the drug or the high itself, but rather having that normalcy that they get because they have a lower dopamine level. The endocannabinoid system of the body responds to cannabis this way. The different cannabinoids the body responds to these cannabinoids if you will. And when we smoke cannabis, the THC, let's say CBD, and the 80, 90 other cannabinoids actually trigger this system, a response to this system. And many drugs simulate other natural endogenous compounds in our body, such as not only cannabis, but heroin. It helps to release dopamine, but when you start talking about things like psychedelics, they actually imitate serotonin. They have a very similar chemical makeup to serotonin. So it's kind of another view on reality, if you will. And so, not to get too far off topic here, but addiction comes because, well, look behind me. What have I got? You could call that an addiction, but it's not. Okay, it is. I'm addicted to pot, and I respect that. I don't deny it. I am not one of those guys who says I can just quit anytime I want, although I know I can. It's just that I won't, and there's a major difference there. I have no desire or interest to quit smoking cannabis. I've smoked for 23, 24 years now consistently. And there were 3 one-year periods, one for 2 years and one for a year, where I did quit, and one more recently. So, when people get to a certain way of living with the drug, and have lived with it for so long, some people may be prone to think, well, this person's never experienced sobriety. So I have. It was a forced sobriety because I was on probation for getting in trouble with mushrooms and pot. So I went and I did my 2-year probation, and I was clean the whole time. And I learned in that time that my addictive personality will swap out with other things. And I'm not an alcohol drinker, but I did the first time, 10 years ago when I had to quit, I actually did drink more, regularly, maybe at least every other day, and I had a couple drinks. Enough to help me sleep, but I'm not a high-strung person. I'm very not stressed, at least these days. In the old days, I would be stressed because I found myself as a very excitable person. Like, I'm an intense person to be around. I talk a lot, go figure. And drugs compound that problem sometimes, but some can help me to kind of escape it for a minute. Such as, say, pot, to mellow me out. But that's never really the reason I smoked it. I just like the feeling. I can't describe why I like pot. Sometimes it makes me mellow, sometimes it doesn't. But it gives me a feeling of not a high, but a sense of normalcy, as if I'm balancing out my system. And that may be part of the addiction, and I guess that's what I wanted to get to. Others who don't have addictions don't understand it, that heroin and cocaine release the same compound, it's the same feeling, and they're just as strongly addictive. Food also releases dopamine. So, when we do certain activities, we can get a flood of serotonin, dopamine, or adrenaline, and it's it becomes an addiction to our endogenous compounds in our body. But when you talk about the runner's high, it makes perfect sense that people would think that ingesting something is not as legitimate as getting it naturally. It would be kind of like trying to attain years of meditation through one psychedelic experience, but it is possible. Or years of awareness through one experience. In other words, nobody wants shortcuts to happiness. People want to have to work for it. But sometimes these compounds really do help. And not being a long-term solution, sometimes people do them long-term. And I have been, as this morning I watched a video about addiction, and a few, and I find them interesting in the sense that you get so many different views of how people view addiction. So with cannabis and kratom as my two plant allies, sometimes I beat myself up over it, thinking, oh God, I smoke pot and I take kratom. And I stop myself and say, wait a minute. I'm taking two natural substances in their natural form with no processing done to them whatsoever. It could be so much worse. I could be doing heroin or I could be doing this, but that doesn't mean that I'm justified. And that's what I'm saying. To what degree can I justify what I do by saying, well, I could be doing this? I don't play mind games with myself. I used to. And even I still find myself doing it, and I slap myself and say, wait, be honest. How is what you're consuming affecting your life positively, and how is it affecting it negatively? And as long as the positive's outweighing the negative, then, generally I'm in the clear. But if I'm harming my body, harming my spirit, staying up for days on end, tweaking, that stuff's not right. I don't do that. As far as cannabis being a relatively safe substance, as far as I see it, in its natural form. And even if a person says smoking it's dangerous, you can still eat it or take tinctures. Many different ways to consume now. There's also kratom. And there's only a few brothers and sisters out there that are my subs that know about kratom, or that take kratom. When I first started talking about it and first got into kratom 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't know a single person who had even heard of it. I found it when I was trying to find something to help me with lethargic, just like kind of a depression. I was kind of in just a stressful state, and I couldn't smoke pot anymore. And I heard about kratom. Nobody sold it in the stores yet. I ordered some online, and I was hooked. And I don't mean that addictively, but it was the greatest thing I'd found, because it got rid of my chronic pain. It gave me a sense of well-being. It gave me a decreased stress level, and it gave me the motivation I needed to get things done when I was working, as well as getting rid of the pain I had. In fact, kratom may be the single most useful plant that I've ever found next to cannabis, and I would call it comparable to cannabis in its potential medical benefits. When you take opiates, and being a person who's a fan of altered states, I always have been, but I've been very cautious. I've realized that over the years, some people have an impression of me that I'm a druggie, let's say. Just like the word addict. They both have horrible implications, and that's what I wanted to point out before this video is done. The word addict, when referring to people who consume any drug, is very offensive. Even if they are an addict, because everyone's an addict to something. And I haven't met anyone who isn't an addict to something. But it shouldn't just be used for drugs. This person, what if a person says, well, that person likes to eat donuts, they're an addict. You can see how it kind of gives it a demeaning quality. I'm not offended personally, I just thought I'd point that out to people who use it regularly. But people who The whole idea is to find something that assists you in your daily life. And with kratom, I wanted to point out a few things. Because I've had a few comments in the past videos I made about kratom where people had said that it can be addictive. One person said that she was doing a whole bunch and then she quit cold turkey and went through withdrawals. And that's just one example. I totally agree with that. That's absolutely going to happen. I quit smoking pot after 20 years, and I even had withdrawals off of pot, okay? Even though they say that there's nothing. Some people say there are, some people say there aren't. I made a mental choice to quit. I just quit cold turkey. And for a few days, I just felt kind of off. See, it wasn't withdrawal. It was just feeling off because you're used to just smoking pot. It's just like if anybody who's ever quit smoking cigarettes knows that as soon as you're done with the cigarette and say, I quit, you want another one right away. You wouldn't have otherwise. But the fact that you've set your mind to a state where you're quitting, instantly you want one all the time. All addictions are like that. We're telling our brains that you're not getting this anymore. You're not getting this reward. And it knows, We can't fool our own brains. So I don't try to fool myself with kratom. Kratom is addictive. And I know this. I've been taking it for about 5 years. I've run out 2 or 3 times. And just kind of felt like shit. Sitting on the couch. And then after a couple of days, I was just like, screw this. And I went down and I found a head shop that carried it. I was actually at work one time and I started getting, I was cold and I was just kind of nauseous. I didn't feel good. Basically, anybody who wants to know what kratom withdrawal is like, look up opiate withdrawal because it does the same thing to your brain. But at a lesser degree, and it's not so harmful as doing heroin, let's say. Not quite as addictive as that. You're not going to die from convulsions from quitting kratom. I think people have been taking a lot of extracts in various forms, which can be more addictive, but the people I've talked to who have said they've had problems are the ones who say they're taking like an ounce or more a day, up to 50 grams a day. For me, it's a little less than a teaspoon in the morning and then maybe 2 teaspoons in the afternoon. So maybe 6 grams a day. Basically, I take about 2 ounces a week tops. That's usually my dose, maybe a little more. And it's pretty mild, I just use it to enhance my days, And when I used to work my ass off as a carpenter, there were days when I needed that boost, and kratom just did that. So I guess what I'm saying is, at what point do you say, I need to quit this? Because of why? Because of what reason? Okay, because it's a substance I'm consuming, and because society tells me that if you take a substance that alters your body chemistry, because kratom doesn't even alter your mind. It doesn't do what heroin does. It's not the same euphoria. You can get body rushes, and yeah, you can get a buzz, but that initially goes away. It's just like taking Valium a few times, you'll get knocked out, and after that it just becomes the norm, What was that? I thought something was going to fall over on me. That was weird. So anyway, yes, kratom's addictive, and people need to realize that everything's addictive. Anything that we try to deprive ourselves of, anything that we consume regularly. Sorry. That's really weird. I'm hearing sounds over there. I thought there might be like a rat in here or something. I guess that's a good time to cut this video. Yeah, maybe not. I got a couple minutes. I guess I just wanted to finish off by saying, that there's a holier-than-thou attitude with people who aren't addicts against those who are. And I've seen the alcoholics picking on the stoners, and the stoners picking on the alcoholics. It's ludicrous to me. They're both addictions. I know in my heart that alcohol is much more harmful than cannabis smoking, in general. However, there are people who just have 1 or 2 drinks a day, and then there are people who smoke shitloads of cannabis oils every day, where the cannabis user is doing much more harm to their health. So, as a general rule of thumb, yes, alcohol can be more devastating as far as what it does if you can overconsume, overindulge. But if you overindulge on cannabis, you might not get anything done, and you may, I guess the ultimate threat to the stoner is getting too high to get life going, or getting things done, procrastinating. But being a stoner, I found that it's not. The stoners don't procrastinate because they're stoners. Procrastinators attach to pot because it helps them procrastinate. Um, I've always been a procrastinator. Even when I quit, I found myself still doing, hesitating, lagging on the same things. So it's a frame of mind, and certain people are better. They're better off smoking pot than drinking, and some people are better off drinking than smoking pot. It's just a plain fact. Different brain chemistries, different bodies, and so it's not right for the people who don't consume anything to judge people as addicts any more than it is for addicts to call them normies. I think we're all addicted to something in one way or another. Some people are addicted to something as simple as arrogance. You know, they're addicted to their pious attitudes because they've found that if they don't or do anything, then certain people see them a certain way, and then they can feed off of the energy that they get from making themselves feel better. That can be an addiction too. So where does it stop really? It's just a bunch of nonsense. I just like to see people all get together and understand each other a little bit better, and that means being honest with ourselves and our addictions. So maybe one day I won't need cannabis anymore, and maybe one day I won't need kratom anymore. And those really are the two. Tobacco's in there too. It comes and goes though. I'll quit for a year and then I'll smoke for a year, a little bit at a time, and sometimes I chew tobacco. Yeah, it's horrible, but it's it's life. It's my life. It's how it is. You know? It's not. It's perfect when the perfect person points their finger at a smoker, says, "Oh, that's bad for you. You should quit." Don't do that. Please don't do that, people. Especially if you're a non-smoker. Especially if you've never smoked. You know, every smoker's well aware of the dangers to their health. It's on the damn cigarette package, okay? We make choices, dangerous choices. Some of us eat too much. Some of us drink too much. Some of us take on dangerous activities. Race car driving. We all take risks, and many of them are preventable. But people who do don't do it because they're unaware or they're dumb. It's addiction, and we're all addicts. Take care, everybody, and